Since its birth, Pakistan's democratic experiment has been punctuated by military coups.
The army came in, they planted puppets. They chose politicians who they could control.
And now, caught on the front line of America's so-called war on terror, Pakistan stands accused of playing a double game, supporting the Taliban abroad whilst fighting them at home.
You can't keep snakes in your backyard and expect them only to bite your neighbors.
When a massacre at a school in Peshawar left the country reeling, the army reasserted itself. So, will the government rein in the generals? Can the voters trust their elected leaders? Or is Pakistan on the brink of becoming a failed state? My guest tonight was the youngest and first female foreign minister of Pakistan when she was appointed in 2011. She said her country has nothing to apologize for.
We feel that we are the ones who have reacted the most, we are the ones who have sacrificed the most, we are the ones who are fighting it on the ground on a daily basis.
I'm Mehdi Hassan and I've come here to the Oxford Union to go head-to-head with the former Pakistani Foreign Minister Hina Rabbani Khir. I'll ask her whose side Pakistan is really on in the fight against terror and whether democracy in her country is in danger. Tonight, I'll also be joined by Omar Waraich, an award-winning British journalist and former Pakistan correspondent for Time magazine. Humaira Iqtidar, Pakistani academic, senior lecturer in South Asian politics at King's College London, and author of Secularizing Islamists. And Musharraf Zaidi, former advisor to the Pakistani Foreign Ministry, as well as to the EU and the UN. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Hina Rabbani Khir. Hina Rabbani Khir was first elected to the Pakistan Parliament at 25. She was Minister of State for Finance and Economic Affairs for 7 years under 2 successive governments and was Foreign Minister between 2011 and 2013. Hina Rabbani Khir, Pakistan, which was founded as a democracy 68 years ago, has been under military rule, military dictatorship for 33 of those 68 years. Today, the country is run by a democratic government. But isn't it true that the military are still running the shots behind the scenes?
Mehdi, it is absolutely true that in the case of Pakistan, unlike any other democratic dispensation, the military has much larger role than typically the Constitution of Pakistan would permit. And interestingly, I don't know if you know this or not, but a civilian-made constitution without any amendments has only been applicable in Pakistan for 4 years, since 2010 and now, and before that between 2 years from 56 to 58.
What did you do as foreign minister to push back against the military? Did you ever get generals ringing you up, telling you what line to take on this or that policy before you went on a foreign trip?
No, I think I was fiercely independent for anyone to call me to tell me which line to take. But clearly, on issues which I thought they were relevant stakeholders, I would always consult, I would love to engage, I would negotiate. On issues where I felt they were not relevant stakeholders, for instance, trade with India, I don't think military was relevant. It's none of their business.
When Osama bin Laden was killed in Pakistan in 2011, you were the de facto foreign minister, but the US administration didn't call you first, didn't call President Zardari first. The first call they made was to the head of the Pakistani army, General Kayani, at the time. The US government knows who's running the show in Pakistan, and they make their phone calls accordingly.
The US government has had a long history of immense fascination with the military of Pakistan. The US government...
Because they're running the show?
Well, because they propped them up. Because Ziaul Haq, when he came in, Pakistan got the best possible military and civilian assistance ever possible. When Musharraf came in, that was the largest military and civilian assistance that ever came to Pakistan. So the US government clearly has a fascination and a preference to deal with military regimes.
Well, when you were foreign minister, if you look at the human rights record during the Zardari time in office, it's clear the army wasn't under government control. They were allowed to operate pretty much with impunity. For example, Human Rights Watch said in 2012 that Pakistan's government has failed to act against abuses by the security and intelligence agencies, which continued to allow extremist groups to attack religious minorities. The authorities did little to address attacks against journalists and committed serious abuses in counter-terrorism operations. When you were sent reports like this from Human Rights Watch, from Amnesty International and others, did you just throw them in the bin, or did you try and take them seriously, and did you investigate those abuses by the army?
I will tell you exactly what we did. In 2010, we created a judicial commission with 3 superior court judges to investigate this matter. In 2011, we re-established a second commission to investigate this matter, which resulted in the fact that today, from 2,800 missing persons which were reported to the second commission. We have 1,500 cases which have already been resolved. This was done by civilian government. I will tell you another thing. What was also done...
How many generals, how many commanding officers were prosecuted?
You're very interested in finding out what was the dynamics.
How many were prosecuted?
So let me just tell you, how many were prosecuted after Abu Ghraib and after Guantanamo Bay? It's very difficult in most societies to be able to prosecute people who are supposed to be protecting the country. So the lines are very thin. There's a lot of grey area over here.
So explain to our audience who are watching at home around the world here in the Oxford Union, can we still call it a democracy?
We absolutely can call it a democracy because it is a democracy which is finding its roots, and it's a democracy which is finding its ground.
Okay, well, let's go to our panel of experts who are listening here in the Oxford Union. Omar Warayich, you served as Time Magazine's Pakistan correspondent for 6 years. In your view, how democratic would you call Pakistan today, and how influential today do you think the military still is?
Oh, it's a fledgling democracy, so there are genuine efforts towards that. However, the military remains preeminent. There's a pattern that happens, which is a civilian government will be elected. They will try something else, like to pursue an independent foreign policy in their first year. They get hit by a political crisis. Then what happens is that to guarantee their survival, they enter a modus vivendi with the army, and they say, we will cede the prerogatives that you wish to control.
How do you break that cycle? Can you break that cycle?
Well, you need two things to happen. One is there needs to be an absence of war. When there is war going on, the army will claim a preeminent role. The other is to have competent civilian government that produces economic growth. In Pakistan's history, you've had neither.
Not even Hina's government?
Certainly not.
Okay, we'll come back to Hina in a moment. Musharraf Zaini, you actually were an advisor to the Pakistani Foreign Ministry. You were in government, I think, at the same time as Hina. Do you feel the military were pushing you around at the time, or did you feel that you had control over them?
I'm a lot more sort of positive about the experience. I think that there was some really, really big issues on which, under the leadership of Foreign Minister Khir, we were able to redefine the way that foreign policy is structured in Pakistan. There's a long history to the bitterness between Afghanistan and Pakistan, but the redefinition and the repositioning of how Islamabad and Pindi relate to Afghanistan, that happened on Hina Rabbani Khir's watch, and it happened not because the military was ready to jump in. The military, frankly, needed to be convinced.
Dr. Humaira Iqtidar, you're a political scientist at King's College London, author of a book on Islamist parties in Pakistan. Do you think the government Hina was part of did enough to rein in the military and subsequent governments to hold them to account? She's talking about the constraints she was up against. What's your view?
I think it's been quite a mixed record, but certainly for the Zardari regime, which Hina was part of, the problem was that there was absolutely no clarity of policy. The war on terror that General Musharraf's regime supported was actually something that Zardari regime had absolutely no alternative to. So, you know, it continued with similar policies, didn't question the war on terror, the fundamentals of the war on terror, the reasoning, the strategies, the success of those strategies.
And that emboldened the military in your view?
And that the war on terror has ultimately been most helpful for the military in Pakistan.
Hina, you lacked clarity and you lacked competence.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe both. I would love to be much more competent and have much more clarity, but I would be very unhappy with myself if I'm told that we lacked clarity on the foreign policy front, because I like to believe that we did humongous work on redirecting the foreign policy. We called it the regional pivot of Pakistan because we believed we didn't need to have a great relationship with London or with Washington, D.C., but a great relationship with Kabul and Delhi. After 35 years, no military government or civilian government in Pakistan had the guts to normalize trade with India. And we were told as a policy that we will not solve the trade problem until we solve Kashmir. We changed that. Do not underestimate the importance of that. Our effigies were burned, for heaven's sake.
The bar is not that high on effigy burning in Pakistan,
no.
to be fair.
That might be, that might be correct.
Just to deal with, Humaira mentioned the so-called war on terror. Following last year's pretty horrific attack on the school in Peshawar in which the Pakistani Taliban, the TTP, killed 132 children, the Prime Minister, Nawaz Sharif, said that Pakistan would no longer differentiate between good Taliban, i.e. those who fight for Pakistan's interests abroad, and bad Taliban, those attacking Pakistan at home. Isn't that basically an admission that that's what had been happening in the past, including during your time in office, that you guys backed the bad Taliban as well as the so-called good Taliban?
I think Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif was slumbering away for the last 5 years before he came into power, because clearly that is the distinctive feature of the policy that we were trying to run. And it is something which was recognized within the military quarters also. And I have to give the military credit for being able to change that policy because it was way deep in their veins. It was considered to be anyone who believed otherwise was a traitor to Pakistan. And we were able to change it. And please say what you may about President Zardari, but do give him credit for the regional pivot and for the fact that the PPP came with a complete regional focus.
Was Hillary Clinton, the US Secretary of State, your counterpart at the time, was she slumbering as well in 2011 when she told you to your face
yes.
that she had evidence that there had been, quote, communication between the Haqqani network, that brutal fighting group in Afghanistan, and elements within the Pakistan government prior to the attack by the Haqqani network on the US Embassy and NATO headquarters in Kabul in September of 2011? How many times as foreign minister did you have to listen to allies of yours basically accuse you to your face that you're a state sponsor of terrorism?
Well, much too many times. I had to listen to that more.
And did you tell them they were all slumbering?
No, I did not tell them they were all slumbering. There were certain things which had waves of truth in them.
Waves of truth?
Yeah, which were partially relics of the past, I believe, which were superimposing on what the present was. Okay, I will tell you one thing. Pakistan did not have the ability, Mehdi, to be able to take on every terror network within the region all at the same time.
No, I think no one's asking you to get to fight all of them, but you didn't have to sponsor and fund them as well.
And as far as sponsoring and funding them was concerned, clearly that I would like to believe that under our watch, that was not the policy direction at all.
So when the chairman of the Joint US Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Mike Mullen, told the Senate in September 2011 that extremist organizations serving as proxies of the government of Pakistan are attacking Afghan troops and civilians and US soldiers, the Haqqani network is a veritable arm of the ISI. Was he slumbering too?
No, he was misguided. Okay? Because I believe, and I think history will prove us to be correct, that Pakistan was scapegoated fantastically for all the ills and the wrongs of the war in Afghanistan.
On drone strikes,
yeah.
What is your view of US drone strikes on Pakistani soil against Pakistani militants and Pakistani civilians? Are you a supporter?
We said that drone strikes are counterproductive. What does counterproductive mean? It means that they are actually fueling extremism and assisting people to attract more people towards extremism. We said that they were against Pakistan's territorial integrity.
We is who? The Pakistani government?
The Pakistani government.
So why, thanks to a US State Department cable, do we hear the Pakistani Prime Minister, Yusuf Raza Gilani, your then boss, saying in private, I don't care if they, the Americans, do drone strikes, as long as they get the right people. We'll protest in the National Assembly and then we'll ignore it. How cynical, how two-faced was your government protesting in public against drone strikes, but backing it in private?
But guess what, Mehdi? I was the foreign minister. The prime minister never said this in the room when I was in the room.
What does that say to you about your status within the government?
No, I was pretty much in every important meeting. So
apart from the one where he said, I like drone strikes. Let's do that.
I was foreign minister from 2011, March 2011, till the end of our term. But what I'm saying is that
you were Minister of Finance in that government.
Yeah, I probably
was.
So
will you condemn your Prime Minister
I'm not willing to believe that he would say a thing like this. I really am not.
So it's made up?
No, possibly, could be. Why not?
Okay, so when President Zardari said to journalists on the record in 2010 in Lahore, there are no differences between Pakistan and the US over any issue, including drone attacks. How does that fit with what you were saying a few minutes ago?
I think what he was referring to was the fact that the US also believes that drone strikes are not a permanent solution. And they do. Okay, let me give you a statistics. For 47 people who were on the hit list, what they call the high-value targets, between Yemen and Pakistan, the US, according to the most conservative reports, killed 1,147 people. How is that? What does that say to you about propelling extremism?
I agree with you. I'm saying to you, I think drone strikes are bad. Sure. The problem is your government in private didn't seem to think they were bad.
What I'm saying is that...
The president, when he talked to reporters, the president told Michael Hayden, CIA director, President Zardari, collateral damage worries you Americans. It does not worry me, in reference to drone strikes.
Not in the room.
Not in the room. You weren't in the room.
I was
so Zardari, Gilani, they take all these decisions, but they don't tell you,
what I'm
the
saying
foreign
is
minister.
That I refuse to believe
and you go out into public to say drones are bad while they're in the back going,
what I'm saying is that it is...
I mean, explain to me how it works.
I'll have to trap you.
Explain to me how it works. Explain the situation.
Okay. What I'm saying is that it is not possible for me to believe that things change so much because of my presence in the room or not. So what I'm saying is that some of these things could have been misrepresented or misreported.
Humaira, misrepresented, misreported. What is your view on the relationship between the Pakistani government and drone strikes?
I think if we take away the question of misrepresentation, we're still left with the fact that in actual fact, drones intensified. During Musharraf's regime, we have way fewer drones than during the Zardari regime.
President Bush and President Obama had a very different perspective on drones. And President Zardari's time, President Obama happened to be the president.
That's right. But
And
at the
President
same time,
Musharraf's time, President Bush happened to be the president who believed in maybe troops on the ground, putting
But
his
President
people...
Zardari, your president couldn't say, no thanks, we don't want these drones.
You know, we have a parliamentary resolution which was probably unprecedented in the history of Pakistan, which clearly stipulated that no one in Pakistan is authorized to give any acquiescence to drone strikes until and unless the parliament ratifies
And
it.
yet, leaked documents from the CIA in 2013 showed that the ISI was helping the CIA pick targets for drone strikes in Pakistan.
This is pre the parliamentary resolution and pre
Okay,
our
let's
government.
go to Musharraf Zaidi. Just moving on from the wider issue of drone strikes that Humayra touches on, there is this constant accusation that Pakistan is playing a double game. On the one hand, it's saying we're with you in the war on terror, we're sacrificing our soldiers, we're fighting against the Taliban and other groups. On the other hand, they're supporting those groups, they're turning a blind eye to what those groups are doing. How do you respond to that charge?
A country is supposed to fulfill its own interests and pursue its own interest above and beyond any other country's interests. So the issue, this whole concept of a double game comes from the standard presupposed assumption that somehow Pakistan's game should be to fulfill what people that live in Washington, D.C. want. But Pakistan's game is not to fulfill...
to be an ally of the United States and take $20 billion from the U.S.?
First of all, it wasn't $20 billion. Second of all, actually, Pakistan was forced because by the admission of the former president of Pakistan, the military dictator Musharraf, and by admission of U.S. authorities themselves, they threatened to bomb Pakistan back to the Stone Age. The blame for drone strikes has to be on the party that's conducting the drone strikes.
And also the party that's helping them, if the party is indeed helping them.
Pakistan is a victim of drone strikes, not a perpetrator.
Not if Pakistan is helping the US with those drone strikes. Would you accept that?
I don't think there's enough proof that,
Okay,
that
let's
Pakistan
bring in
has helped.
Omar, you've heard what Musharraf has said and Hina said. What's your response?
Well, on the drone strikes, I mean, Pakistan could easily deny the airspace. And recently, there was a TTP commander who was killed on the Afghan side with intelligence provided by the Pakistanis. So, I mean, that answers that case. And when it came to militants, they targeted the ones that they fought the ones that they had to, they appeased the ones that they could, they ignored the ones that didn't touch them, and they discreetly supported the ones who fought across their borders. This was part of a strategy to try and maximize influence in the region.
Did it work? Because some people talk about blowback. You have the TTP now blowing stuff up.
No, but we have to be...
Oh, the TTP certainly was blowback. It depends what situation you're looking at. And I think this is actually the reason why, yes, you did try a regional pivot, but Pakistan remains massively isolated, internationally and regionally.
You know, interestingly, one doesn't tire from hearing how much blood the world has given in terms of trying to reform Afghanistan. 3,500 or even less than that, is the total number of ISAF soldiers who have lost their lives in that time period. In Pakistan, 6,000 soldiers and policemen have lost their lives in the same period. I bet they were fighting people that they created themselves. I bet at the same time they were funneling them, they were giving them arms and ammunition and money, and at the same time they were fighting them.
Hold on, you're conceding that the people who died fighting in the Pakistani armed forces were fighting people that they helped create. You're conceding that.
No, I'm not at all conceding that. I'm saying how remarkably sadistic do you think we are to be able to even give us an argument like this? It's a starkly evident which you're refusing to see, Mehdi. Pakistan's job is to protect its own people before the United States of America.
And you're not doing a good job of that, are you?
But I think that's where we have failed.
No, what I'm saying is...
Because the tribal areas, I mean, the statistics are of the supposedly approximately 4,000 people who've died, only 726 have been named. Of those, only about 169 are alleged militants. They are disproportionately affecting civilians. As foreign minister, you never took this up. The only issue that you did take up was of America.
Humayra, you were clearly not following me as foreign minister for you to say that. No, really. I'm not going to take anything else because I believe I was a major factor in ensuring that there was no double facing on Pakistan's drone policy, because I take myself seriously and I take the trust and the responsibility of the people of Pakistan that is put in me as an elected member very seriously.
Let's stick with the subject of double-facing, the accusations that are made against your government. You were the de facto foreign minister during the US raid on Osama bin Laden's compound in Abbottabad in May 2011, in which he was killed. When you got the news that bin Laden was killed, were you surprised, shocked even, that he had been found in Pakistan? Or was your reaction more like, uh-oh, they found him in the place we kind of knew he was, but we didn't want anyone to know? Which one was it? What was your reaction on the morning?
It was completely, I think shocked would be underselling it also. I mean, we went still. We didn't know what happened. And we went still. We didn't know how to react also.
Your own former cabinet colleague, ex-defense minister Chaudhry Ahmad Mukhtar, said in October that President Zardari and the head of the Pakistani army then, General Kayani, both knew that bin Laden was in Pakistan.
Yeah.
Did you know, or were you not in the room?
No, he was not in the room. He was not in the room.
The defense minister wasn't in the room.
The defense minister, the fact is the defense minister was not in the room and I was in the room. That's a fact. And I can assure you the defense minister doesn't know the first thing about what, the former defense minister doesn't know the first thing that he's talking about. And
why was he appointed defense
about this
minister?
particular,
it's slightly embarrassing when you say that the defense minister of your government didn't have a clue.
It's up to the government to appoint the defense minister.
Yes.
By appointing someone, and this is the defense minister who said he found out about the raid because his daughter called him from New York.
yes. Omar?
That's how he found out.
Let me
Let's
say.
deal with
To appoint this person and then argue that they were in control of policy and they didn't give the army any room is just risible.
Can I just respond to that?
Please do, briefly.
Omar,
and then
I completely agree with you on this one. The defense minister in Pakistan is the most ineffective minister who knows nothing about the defense or the foreign policy of Pakistan. That is a fact.
That is
I'm
my
not going
next
to deny
guest
that.
on this show.
Please go get it. Go get it.
And I'm going to open with that intro. Just deal with the bin Laden point.
That's a fact.
Just deal with the bin Laden point. So you are saying nobody in the government had a clue about bin Laden being in Pakistan, even though he was in a military town, in a purpose-built compound down the road from a military academy. The military had no clue he was there. Seriously.
Okay. So the people in the room, in this room, I can tell you, President Zardari, Prime Minister Yusuf Raza Gilani, myself as the Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Secretary Foreign Affairs, Military Chief, ISI Chief. 6 people in the room, right? Either all of them had to be fantastic actors who must get job in Hollywood or at least Bollywood, because they all made a great pretense of being still and shocked, like I explained to you, and not knowing how to react. If we knew how to react, would we give a silly statement like we did? Because we didn't know how to react. We gave a silly statement out, which we had to almost retract the next day.
So when US Defense Secretary Leon Panetta told Congress at the time in May 2011 that Pakistan was either involved or incompetent in terms of bin Laden's whereabouts, I'm guessing you're going to go with incompetent.
Guilty for being incompetent. Yeah.
Okay. So, and when Cyril Almeida, the Pakistani journalist, said in a piece at the time, if we didn't know bin Laden was in Abbottabad, we are a failed state. If we did know, we are a rogue state.
If the United States of America could not find where Osama bin Laden is, does that make it a rogue state or a failed state? I think we rushed too quickly to call Pakistan and the likes of Pakistan a failed state.
To be fair,
Pakistan has suffered because of regional
if bin
play.
Laden was living down the road from the Pentagon, I think we would judge the United States.
No, you might as well. What the fact of the matter is that there was a lot of intelligence agencies which were around, okay?
Yeah.
So if they didn't know and we didn't know, we were all in the same page. We were all in the same.
One last question before we have to take a break. Perceptionally, do you accept that people see Pakistan in a pretty bad way when it comes to the subject of political violence, extremism, terrorism?
I think many Pakistanis accept that. Many Pakistanis see Pakistan at a pretty bad place. But that all happened after 1979. Pakistan was at a very good place. When we put in extremism into the thought process, into the minds and bodies of Pakistanis, trained them to be mujahideen, and then said, okay, done with it, extremism thought, take out. Where was the exit strategy? What the hell, man? I mean, what the, really?
We're going to take a break there. In part 2, we're going to be talking to Hina Rabbani about the intractable conflict in Kashmir. We're going to hear more from our panel of experts, and we're going to hear from our audience here in the Oxford Union. That's after the break. Welcome back to Head on Al Jazeera. We've been talking about Pakistan with the country's former foreign minister, Hina Rabbani, who's here with me in the Oxford Union. We've been talking about drone strikes, the role of the military, the raid on bin Laden. Let's talk about Kashmir. The former president of Pakistan, General Musharraf, once said that Kashmir runs in our blood and we will never budge an inch on it. Recently, General Raheel Sharif, the head of the Pakistani army, called Kashmir Pakistan's jugular vein. Hasn't this obsession with Kashmir and this kind of hyperbolic rhetoric done more harm than good to Pakistan over the past 7 decades, especially in recent years?
Okay, Mehdi, I don't think you can underestimate or take away the importance of Kashmir or portray it as a figment of Pakistan's imagination on crazy Pakistanis going crazy over Kashmir, okay? We have Resolution 47 of the Security Council of the UN to prove, on a request of the Indian government who went to the Security Council asked for a certain number of things to be done, which included the holding of a free plebiscite, which
in the late 1940s.
which would determine. Yes, it was in 1948 to be precise, and then there was another resolution in 1950, and then there was another one, and this has been a constant theme, right?
Would you agree that the military's role in Kashmir policy, especially in terms of backing various insurgent groups, has been a very violent insurgency, killed tens of thousands of people since the late 1980s. Do you think that has been a way for the military to control foreign and defense policy in Pakistan, subvert it even, have a bloated budget beyond what really it should have?
Pretty much a lot of academic work, and academic work even by Indians, proves that the Kashmir insurgency in some ways was instigated by the government of India more than by Pakistan, that they made it happen.
Okay, but deal with my specific point about the Pakistan military since, over the last 25 years.
The Pakistan military obviously will have a very different view on any issue which has to do with territory than a politician, right? Because we would try and find a non-military way to deal with the situation. And that's why within the constitution, the military has a certain role and the parliament has a certain role and the executive has a certain role.
But even non-militarily, there's certain provocative things you can do. When you went to India yourself in 2011 as foreign minister, you kicked off your visit not by meeting your Indian counterpart or meeting with the elected Indian government, but first by meeting with Kashmiri separatist groups.
And what's the harm in that?
You don't think Pakistani foreign ministers meeting separatist groups before they meet their counterpart is provocative at all?
Absolutely not.
You didn't
They
know?
are part of
you were shocked when people were upset when you arrived.
They're part of the dialogue process.
Okay. Why is Hafiz Muhammad Saeed, founder of Lashkar-e-Taiba, a banned group, banned in Pakistan and internationally, leader of the now rebranded Jamaat al-Dawa, he has a $10 million bounty on his head. He's on the UN and the US terrorist watch lists, and yet lives a pretty normal, free, middle-class life in the city of Lahore. He holds public meetings, he goes on TV. How does that work?
As far as the LET is concerned, believe me, we had zero love lost for them. And Hafiz Saeed, I don't think
With
has
respect,
anything...
what I believe is irrelevant. This man is wandering around a free man, saying some outrageous things, doing press conferences. He's got police protection. Why?
I think he's been tried. I don't think the
But he's a free man right now in Lahore.
Clearly, the courts let him go.
Why?
The judiciary in Pakistan is free, and our system is very similar to that of India. So please, when you...
You have plenty of anti-terror laws that allow you to round up hundreds of people all the time. Amnesty says there are several hundred people detained without charge in Pakistan. Many people would say you detain lots of people you don't like, but this guy you don't detain, and they'll draw their own conclusions from that.
I'm just going to say that Hafiz Saeed is not somebody I'm willing to protect in any way on this show or elsewhere.
But
so
when you were in government, you did not lock him up.
I did absolutely try my absolute level best to make sure that he was not somebody that the state of Pakistan associated with any which way.
You weren't the foreign minister in 2008 when the Mumbai attacks happened.
I was not.
Pakistan has been accused of sponsoring those attacks. You were foreign minister in 2011 when American citizen David Headley pleaded guilty to helping militant group Lashkar-e-Taiba in carrying out those attacks, which killed 160 people. He testified that Lashkar, quote, operated under the umbrella of the ISI and coordinated with each other. The ISI provided assistance to Lashkar, financial, military, moral. When you heard him say that, did you kickstart an investigation into the ISI to see if those claims were true?
I think we were briefed as to the credibility of those claims, and he was considered to be a double, triple type of an agent sort of a person.
Isn't that more of a reason to investigate his claims?
Who had very little credibility.
You said you got briefed. That's not an investigation.
Yeah, the briefing is what
they told you
the briefing is what we asked for. Yeah.
And they just said, we didn't do it, and you said, that's fine.
As I said, I think we directed a change of policy, which is showing its results.
But you didn't hold anyone to account over the Mumbai attacks.
You're not accepting that argument.
I'm asking, did you hold anyone to account over the Mumbai attacks?
I'm saying that we tried to push as much as is possible. I still believe today, I believed at that time that it was in Pakistan's best interest to get a resolution to the Mumbai trial. It was in our best interest.
It took a long time.
But I can remind you of the fact that the Samjhota Express trials are still ongoing in India. Them and us have a very similar judicial process. Okay. So unfortunately, we cannot kickstart or push judicial processes when judiciaries are independent.
My point was that when you want to bend laws to arrest and detain people, you do it all the time.
No, we go to the parliament. Please don't say that, Mehdi. I would hold you accountable for that. We go to the parliament.
Hold me accountable, but not the ISI.
Yes, because I don't want to laugh this matter away.
Well,
let me explain.
Please
let me explain the difference between Pakistan of the 1970s or 80s when military regimes was there was that the military did not need to get laws passed through parliament to get military courts on.
But now they have those powers.
Now they have to go to parliament. That is accepting
no, that's not
the
true.
sovereignty.
Under the Protection of Pakistan Act and under the Action in Aid of Civil Power Regulation, the military has the power to round up people they suspect in counter-terror operations.
And they have to go to parliament to get ratification.
And they didn't round up Hafiz Muhammad Saeed, is my point. They didn't round up lots of other people.
That is something that
So that's the only point I was making about legal processes. One last question before I go to our panel. President Zardari said in 2011 that 35,000 Pakistanis have been killed in militant attacks. Many of them, a lot of people would say, by fighters coming home from Kashmir in blowback. People who were armed, trained, radicalized in Kashmir, they came home, brought that expertise, that ideology, that violence with them. Is that a point you would share?
No, I would share it on the other border. And I think you were selectively choosing to use it on the eastern border, whereas the reality was that it was on the western border. It was the arms and ammunition and the money which had come from all over the world, which had gone to train people to go and
so
fight.
Only from Afghanistan blowback, none
Absolutely.
from Kashmir? Okay, let's
from
put that
Kashmir, I have already said that it was our policy to ensure that there was no instigation on that end, because we were trying to pursue the path of negotiations.
Let's put that point to our panel. Umar Warayich, you served as Time Magazine's Pakistan correspondent for 6 years. Blowback from Kashmir. Do you believe there's been blowback from Kashmir for Pakistan?
Oh, there's certainly been groups and militants who have fought in Kashmir and then subsequently fought inside Pakistan. I mean, that's documented. There are people from JEM, from Huji, from these other groups. You can find them. They've been on Pakistan's kill list. They've been on Pakistan's most wanted list. So that point.
And in terms of the Hina's point about genuinely want to resolve it bilaterally through trade, how would you divvy up responsibility?
Well, it's an intractable problem because Pakistan wants to raise the Kashmir issue because it embarrasses India. Pakistan can assert some moral authority over India in that way. But the problem is that Pakistan's so isolated. It's the only country that is actually saying this. They can't get anyone else on board. By contrast, the Indians know that this is an inconvenience, a source of embarrassment, but they also know that they're economically strong enough to ignore Pakistan and to make sure that other people ignore Pakistan.
Musharraf Zaidi, you were an advisor to the Pakistani Foreign Ministry. Omar says that Pakistan has been trying to use Kashmir to embarrass India, and yet India's managed to shrug it off. I'm guessing you disagree with that analysis.
The problem in Kashmir is India, not Pakistan. Even if we accept the Indian claims over Kashmir, particularly if we accept the Indian claims over Kashmir, then it's an entirely Indian problem to solve. Yes, Pakistan made some very, very poor choices in supporting various militant groups at a certain point in time, especially during the 90s. But other than that blemish, the record that Pakistan has on Kashmir is actually something that as a Pakistani, I'm proud of. I'm proud of the fact that I belong to a country that stands up for people's rights, particularly when it comes to Kashmir, because that's the one place where nobody else is willing to stand up. Not the British, not the Americans, not the Saudis, not the Iranians, not the Burmese or the Afghans, only the Pakistanis.
Let me put that point to Dr. Humaira Iqtidar, political scientist at King's College London, author of a book on Islamist parties in Pakistan. Do you believe that Pakistan's role in Kashmir has been a wholly positive one on the support of oppressed peoples?
At the popular level, there is immense support for the Kashmir issue. And of course, it is an issue in which the Indian government has played a very reprehensible role as well. My concern has been, and particularly with regard to the Zardari regime, that since they did not question the war on terror narrative, since they let the military play out its responses to the war on terror, since they actually led to a militarization of all policy in that way, they've handed Kashmir on a platter to India. Because now, every time we have a conversation about Kashmir, India says, oh, but your country is a terrorist country. And, you need to actually fix terrorism
before I let Hina respond to that, very briefly, do you believe the Pakistani military has no interest in a solution in Kashmir? Because as long as it's going on, it gets resources, it gets status, it gets to control policy. Do you share that?
I think the Pakistani army is actually in a slightly complicated situation with that, because on the one hand, they've motivated generations of soldiers with the whole question of Kashmir and independence for Kashmir, etc. And at the same time, we see that the people of Kashmir are not necessarily now looking to join with Pakistan anymore.
Well, yeah, let me put that specific point. The problem is Kashmiris aren't exactly massive fans of your country. A poll in 2010 found that only 50% of Pakistan-administered Kashmir want to be part of Pakistan. Only 2% of the people in Indian-administered Kashmir want to be part of Pakistan.
I would be very happy if the Kashmiri people get the choice to choose between India, Pakistan, or an independent state.
So you would have an independence question?
I would be very happy if they choose an independent state or to go with India. I just feel
was that policy under your government? Just to clarify, was that policy?
That is absolutely the policy.
I have three questions: India, Pakistan, independence.
Exactly.
Just before I go to the audience, just clarify for me, explain to me, is the current position of the Pakistani government to have a referendum in Kashmir with 3 questions on the ballot paper?
What I'm saying is Pakistan is committed to the Kashmiri people getting the right to choose.
Between India, Pakistan and independence?
That is
the policy of the government?
We are completely committed to the United Nations Security Council
Which doesn't have
resolution.
a third question.
That's what I'm wondering. It doesn't have a third
India
question.
Or Pakistan.
In India
the resolution
or Pakistan,
says India, Pakistan. You've introduced a new option.
That's not part of the resolution, but what I'm saying is that as far as the Kashmiri people are concerned,
your view is there should be 3 questions.
That is absolutely my view.
And was that your view when you were in office?
That was my view when I was in office.
Okay, let's go to our audience who've been waiting very patiently here in the Oxford Union. Let's go to the lady just here, 3rd row in the front. Here, yes.
Your party, PPP, champions democracy but fails to, in substance, implement it even within your own party. One bhutto follows the next. You yourself are from a political family. How do you expect there to be meaningful change in the country if the people in charge of that change got there because of who they're related to rather than what they've done for the country?
I don't think you can singulate Pakistan in that Hillary Clinton will be following President Bill Clinton. There are many, many examples all over the world.
To be fair to Hillary Clinton, she served as a senator and Secretary of State. What did Bilawal Bhutto do before he was put in charge of the party? I believe he was a university student at the time.
Yes.
In this great town.
No. In Pakistan, his mother is right there.
So is that why you got the job?
Therefore, no. I think clearly the fact of the matter is that in Pakistan and in all developing countries, it does matter where you were born. Okay, I have been born to a privileged background. And I will not take that away from the fact that, oh yes, I built every step of the way here. I got there because I was the daughter of a father who was already a politician. That is the fact. That is the reality. How are we changing that? By giving opportunity to more people who are not maybe as privileged as I have been, right? And by institutionalizing those changes. For instance, in Parliament today, there are women who are nominated through political parties, and many women from middle-class background, even lower middle-class background, make it to Parliament. So they can institutionalize those changes. So Pakistan, don't judge Pakistan for where it is today. Judge Pakistan for where it is going.
Just on Bilawal Bhutto, when he was appointed to run the party, he was a university undergraduate. What was your reaction when you heard that news? Were you still like you were when you heard the Bin Laden news?
No, I was not.
Were you shocked?
No, not at all. I think it was very
expected.
expected.
Our great leader, I defer to this boy.
I thought it was the most expected thing to do. I'm being honest with you. It was the most expected thing to do. The Pakistan People's Party runs on the Bhutto name. That's a fact.
Okay, let's go back to the audience. Let's go to the gentleman here in the front row.
Hundreds of Ahmadi Muslims in Pakistan have been killed simply on grounds of faith, whether it's in their mosques, their homes, or places of business. How can Pakistan inculcate a culture of tolerance when your own constitution and laws explicitly target Ahmadi Muslims, making it a crime punishable by 3 years imprisonment or by death under the blasphemy laws for an Ahmadi to call themselves a Muslim? Isn't it time Pakistan repealed these laws and ended its state-sponsored persecution of Ahmadis?
Okay, I'm embarrassed to be a Pakistani when I remember the fact that the white in our flag represents the right of minorities. And Qaeda-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, even before August 1947, said that you are allowed to go to your mosque, you're allowed to go to... It is not the business of state, he said, to question your religion. I'm embarrassed that we've done to minorities what we've done in Pakistan. I will accept it.
So just to be clear, in terms of policy levels, things like a Pakistani goes to get a passport and has to declare that Ahmadi is a non-Muslim, that's an outrage, is it not?
I think that is completely unrequired. That's my personal view.
Okay, let's go back to the audience. Gentleman here in the second row with the glasses.
Hi, I'm David from Index on Censorship. The Pakistani Supreme Court's recently called for reform of the blasphemy laws. We welcome this first step, given the way in which the law is used disproportionately against non-Muslims, abused to fulfill personal vendettas, and in a way that encourages extrajudicial punishments, including killings. But isn't it about time that Pakistan altogether abolished a law that is both counterproductive and wholly inconsistent with the basic rights of free expression, freedom of religion, liberty of conscience?
Okay, can I correct your facts before I respond to that? It is not disproportionately bent towards minorities, and I'll give you a simple fact. Apparently, in a period of 2 years, and this is when I was in government, so this is like two years back, there were about 300 cases under the blasphemy law which were put there. Out of that, there were 9 or 10 which were against minorities, and the rest of them were apparently against Muslims. And there's not a single person within Pakistan who has been punished under blasphemy law. Okay? So the blasphemy, I'm not going to try and justify blasphemy law over
But
here.
your colleagues were murdered.
Sorry?
Your colleagues were murdered.
Yes.
Salman Taseer and Shahbaz Bhatti were both assassinated.
They were quote-unquote punished.
And your government did nothing.
Yes. At that time, our government believed that that was not the time to propagate this issue further because we could not get any results.
So what happened to the memory of them?
I'm just telling you, I feel that in this year, in 2015, the Supreme Court judgment on that particular issue, it basically vindicates the stance that we took.
Why didn't you change the law?
During Musharraf's regime, during Musharraf's time, there was a real effort to try and change the law. There was huge resistance against it, okay? And they tanked. We tanked, right? That's, again, a reality. We need to get Pakistan out of this atmosphere of extremist thought and people fighting each other, create the circumstances, and I think this will be a natural step that Pakistan will take.
I want to go back to the audience, but very quickly, a genuine question. Was it because you feared for your life? A lot of politicians saw what happened to Salman Taseer, said, I'm not going down that road.
I think at that time it wasn't fearing for your life as much as...
High-profile people were being killed.
No, I'm talking about the Musharraf time.
I'm talking about Salman Taseer.
At that time, people were scared for their lives. People were being killed right, left, and center. Everybody was scared for their lives.
Okay, I'm going to go back to the audience. We need to get some more audience questions back in. Let's go to the gentleman here.
I just had a question about Afghanistan. Does Pakistan have any interest in seeing a stably democratic Afghanistan, and do Pakistan's leaders have any vested interest in the continuation of the global war on terror?
I think it's a wrong question to ask. I mean, Pakistan is probably the country which is the most affected because of instability, war, and strife in Afghanistan. Whatever happens in Afghanistan, within minutes, within seconds, permeates through the borders and enters into our country. So we have zero interest in strife in Afghanistan.
Fine, let's go back to the audience. Let's try and get some more questions and shorter answers. Lady here.
In February 2015, General Musharraf admitted to Guardian that during the Karzai's regime, Musharraf's government was working against Afghanistan and ordered intel service intelligence to train the Taliban and undermine Afghan government. The question is why this controversial policy of love and hatred toward Afghanistan?
I would not believe General Musharraf is dumb enough to say something like that on record, even if he was doing it. So I cannot respond to that.
He did.
Well, then why would I explain anything?
He's dumb or dishonest?
Well, you were in his government.
No, I was clearly not anywhere close to the foreign policy or security policy.
Come on, every time there's a difficult question, you're either in the room or not in the room, depending on how difficult the question is. Let's go. That lady there has been waiting. Let me go to the lady behind. Yes, you with the glasses.
My name's Paimona Asad. I met you in 2012 in Islamabad, and I asked you 3 questions. Afterwards, ISI officers approached me, and they asked me why I had asked you those questions. So I hope this time I won't get approached by anyone. So my question is, you sit there and you say that you don't justify civilian deaths, but recently, Akhtar Mansour, the leader of the Taliban, the Afghan Taliban, has been known to be injured and is being treated in a hospital in Quetta, which is in Pakistan. Osama bin Laden was found in Pakistan. Jalaluddin Haqqani is in Pakistan. Mullah Omar died in Pakistan. So how can you justify civilian deaths?
There are 3 million Afghans who are living in Pakistan. Pakistan has tried very hard to put a biometric system in place. Pakistan has tried very hard to fence the border. Pakistan puts 196, or even if that number, 391 border posts to check the movement of Pakistanis and Afghanistanis. And what does Afghanistan do? Put 109 border posts. So we have tried very hard to convince our Afghan friends that it is in our interest, both of our interests, to ensure that this border is manned properly. So you stop blaming us for whatever happens in your country. They have refused to do that. And stop blaming us. Stop blaming us. Not taking this blame.
Okay, this gentleman here has been waiting for a while.
Something that's affected me and my family at a very personal level is the systematic and ongoing genocide against Shia Muslims in Pakistan. In July 2013, there was an interview where you said that your government had a deep and abiding commitment to find those responsible and to prevent those going forward. So can I ask what you specifically have done when you were in government to prevent those attacks, and why those have been those actions were so unsuccessful, because we still see increasing attacks and genocide?
Again, I'm not going to justify that. That is part of, in some ways, a correlated thing to the minorities, because we have created this. This is the mainstream, which is Sunni and Muslim, and everybody else is a minority in some ways, okay? And we feel that what I'm saying is past policies in previous times have created this atmosphere where people are free to kill, right?
That's true. Past policies have done that.
Yes.
But he raised your government between 2011 and 2013. I believe more than 1,000 Shias were killed in Pakistan. That was when you were foreign minister. What practical steps did you take to say, okay, we're going to protect this minority that's being killed?
You know, we did try our best to give as much security, because that's what you can do. These are bad, deep-rooted problems which cannot be done away with in days or months or even years. You know, I believe what is happening in Pakistan, what started happening in Pakistan 10 years back in terms of...
You have this huge military fighting all sorts of places, but you can't protect your people at home.
Well, these are the relentless killing of Shias that has gone on for a long time in Pakistan has suffered a massive sort of blow repeatedly over the last 6 months. anti-Shia militants and terrorists have been killed in police encounters in Pakistan more than once. So there's no question that there's blowback against those policies. But the point is that these issues are going to take a long time to resolve.
Certainly not. Point. Let's go to the lady there who's waiting there. And yes, at the purple top, do you wait for a microphone?
So my question is related to the army's interference in the Pakistani governance. It's a very basic thing. When will Pakistan be free from the army's interference in governance and become a credible nation for itself, for its neighbors, and for the rest of the world?
When Pakistan has had longer than 8 years, as I said, under constitutional rule, Pakistan is on its way to do that. You need to give this country time. I am the first one to accept that Pakistan has suffered greatly because of these constant military takeovers. We haven't had a run of constitution which goes even into a decade. We are a very, very young nation. Democratically, we are tiny, we are puny, we are an infant. Okay. Give us time.
Okay, let's take the question here for this gentleman here.
My name is Asghar Baloch and I'm from Balochistan. In a decade, over 14,000 Baloch people have become the victim of enforced disappearance, with journalists, intellectuals, students, bodies being dumped on the roadside. And my question is, either we have to believe that your government was complicit in the atrocities, or you have just adopted a silence on those atrocities.
Yeah, in 2008, when we come into power, President Zardari announces ceasefire that lasts for 6 months. So clearly we are complicit. In 2010, we give the first broad clemency for anyone who wants to come for dialogue. You know, I have no reason to doubt what you're saying, but 16,000 doesn't look like a correct number because the commission which was formed took 1,800 persons, or close to that, and out of that, the unresolved cases which were taken to the commission is 187 today.
Let's go back to the last question, gentleman here, the white shirt.
Hi, I'm a Kashmiri Pandit from India. How are you planning to bring peace in Kashmir, considering again that Kashmiris, they just don't want to be with India or Pakistan?
We just want them to have the right to choose. Get Prime Minister Modi to agree to that. I will get Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif to agree to the same.
On that perhaps optimistic note, depending on which angle you look at it, we're going to have to leave it there. Hina, Rabbani, Khir, thank you for joining me on Head to Head. Thanks to our panel and audience here in the Oxford Union. Head to Head will be back next week, and we'll be talking about India, which I'm sure Hina will be pleased to hear. We'll be talking about India on Head to Head next week, so do join the programme again then. Good night.